Okay, so have you ever stopped to think about just how much money some of these super rich people actually have?
Oh, yeah. All the time.
It's kind of mind-boggling, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. So, okay, get this. Elon Musk, Elon Musk,
Oh yeah.
his wealth is so huge that if he lived on like what the average American makes, an average salary,
Right.
he could keep that up for over 3 million years. 3
Mm-hmm.
million years.
Wow.
Now, try to imagine this. You trying to save up Elon Musk money,
Right.
okay,
Right.
by putting away half of your salary every year. Every single year. Let's
Yeah.
be honest, you'd probably never get there. It
No.
would take you something like 6.5 million years to reach that kind of wealth.
That's just unbelievable.
It really makes you think about what wealth really means, doesn't it?
It does. It puts things in perspective for sure.
And the book we're going deep on today, they say it straight up. For the rich, wealth is measured in time. And that's such an interesting way to look at it because it leads us to the big question we want to explore today. How long could you actually survive, truly live on what you've saved up if you suddenly lost your job tomorrow?
Right. No more income. How long could you keep going?
Exactly.
Hmm.
And that's the real definition of wealth according to this book. It's not about how big your paycheck is. It's about how secure and how independent you are financially.
I like that. And the book that's giving us all this food for thought, it's a classic, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
Oh, yeah, a lot of people have heard of that one.
For sure. And the main idea is all about the financial knowledge that rich families seem to pass down through generations.
Like their own secret money guide.
Right, like a playbook for wealth. And it's totally different from what most of us learn in school or even from our own parents sometimes.
Yeah, it's like they're playing a different game entirely.
Totally. And our goal today is to pull out the most powerful ideas from this book, the stuff that can actually change how you think about money and put you on the path to financial freedom. And we're going deep, covering about 95% of what this book has to offer.
Right, so strap in, everyone.
Exactly. So to set the stage, Rich Dad, Poor Dad tells the story of, well, Rich Dad and Poor Dad. Rich Dad was this high school dropout who ended up becoming one of the richest guys in Hawaii, and he built a huge empire.
Wow, a real self-made success story.
Totally. Now, Poor Dad was actually very educated. He had all these degrees and a good job, but when he passed away, he left behind a bunch of debt.
Hmm, that's a pretty stark contrast.
It is. And so Robert Kiyosaki, the author, he learned all these lessons from Rich Dad. And one of the biggest differences between them was how they reacted to money problems. Poor Dad would always say, I can't afford that, and that was it, end of story.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that one before.
But Rich Dad, his first reaction was always, how can I afford that? Just a small change in words, but a huge difference in mindset.
Totally. It changes the whole way you approach the problem. Instead of giving up, you're looking for solutions.
Right. It's about taking control of your finances, not letting them control you. And that leads us right into the first big lesson from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The rich don't work for money.
Now, that sounds a little counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, we all got to work to make a living.
it does, right. But it's all about a fundamental shift in how you think about money. The book says poor and middle-class people often get stuck in this cycle of working for their money while wealthy people figure out how to make their money work for them.
I see where they're going with that.
So Kiyosaki tells this story about when he was 9 years old. He and his friend Mike, they wanted to learn how to make money. So they went to Mike's dad, who was Rich Dad.
Makes sense. Go straight to the source, right?
Exactly. So Rich Dad had them doing all these little jobs around his businesses, but he only paid Robert 10 cents a week.
10 cents. Come on.
Yeah, Robert was pretty upset about it. He felt like he was being exploited and even thought about quitting because the pay was so bad.
Well, yeah, I mean, who wouldn't?
But Rich Dad used that opportunity to teach them a really important lesson. Life pushes all of us around.
Oh, I'm starting to get the picture.
When things get tough, some people just give up. But the wealthy, they fight back. They learn from those challenges. Think about it. How many people do you know who leave their jobs just because they think the pay isn't good enough?
Yeah, I can think of a few.
Right. But that's not how you build wealth. And this whole cycle of working for a paycheck, spending what you earn, and then working even harder for more money, the book calls it the rat race.
Rat race. So true. It's like you're stuck on a treadmill, running and running, but never really getting anywhere.
Exactly. And the rat race is driven by two things: fear and greed. Fear of not having enough money and greed for more and more stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're afraid of being broke, so you work harder.
Yeah.
Then you get a little extra money, and you want to buy all these things you think you need. Then you have to work even harder to afford it all.
It's a never-ending cycle. So to help Robert and Mike break free from that mindset, Rich Dad did something pretty radical. He cut their pay down to zero.
Wow. Talk about tough love.
Right. Robert was like, how am I going to tell my dad about this? But this forced them to get creative. They had to figure out how to make money on their own.
And what did they do?
Well, they noticed some old comic books lying around in one of Rich Dad's stores, and they had this idea. They started a comic book library in Robert's basement.
A comic book library. That's pretty clever for 9-year-olds.
Right. They charged their friends 10 cents to come in and read the comics, and they even hired Robert's sister to manage the library for $1 a week.
Nice. So they were making money without actually having to work for it in the traditional sense.
Exactly. And they were making $9.50 a week, more than they were making before.
So they turned their problem into an opportunity. That's a valuable lesson right there.
Absolutely. It taught them that true wealth isn't about trading your time for money. It's about creating systems that generate income without you having to constantly work for it.
So it's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. And that's something anyone can apply, no matter what their job is. The key takeaway here is this. Getting a job is just a short-term solution for paying your bills. It's not a long-term plan for building wealth.
Right. Because when most people get a raise, they just end up spending more. They upgrade their lifestyle, buy a bigger house, a nicer car.
Right. And then they're right back where they started, stuck in the rat race. So the book argues that schools don't really teach us how to be financially successful.
Yeah, that's true. You don't really get classes on personal finance or investing.
Nope. The book says that schools are mostly designed to train us to be employees, not employers or investors. And that leads to the second big lesson from Rich Dad, Poor Dad: teach financial literacy.
Makes sense. If schools aren't teaching it, we have to learn it ourselves.
Exactly. And the first step is to understand the most basic principle of personal finance: the difference between an asset and a liability.
Okay, so let's break that down. What exactly is an asset?
An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. Simple as that. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket.
Okay, so if you think about it like a water pipe, assets are like taps pouring money in, and liabilities are like leaks draining it away.
I like that analogy. And to understand how these things affect your money, you got to understand your income statement.
What's an income statement?
It's basically a snapshot of your money coming in and going out over a certain period of time, like your income from your job and your expenses like rent, food, bills, stuff like that.
So your income statement tells you where your money is going.
Mm-hmm.
But assets and liabilities are about how those things affect your cash flow over time.
Right. An asset is like a little money-making machine. It keeps putting money in your pocket even when you're not actively working. A liability, on the other hand, it keeps taking money out, like a little money vacuum.
Got it. So you want to build up your assets and minimize your liabilities. Seems pretty obvious now that you put it that way.
It does, right. But here's the thing. A lot of people, especially middle-class folks, they buy things they think are assets, but they're actually liabilities.
Like what? Give me an example.
A big one is your house.
My house. But everyone says owning a home is a good investment.
Yeah, that's what we're often told, right? But Rich Dad says that for a lot of people, their house is actually a liability.
Oh, so?
Well, think about it. You have to pay your mortgage every month. Property taxes, insurance, repairs, maintenance, all that stuff is money going out of your pocket.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean.
Plus, all that money you put into your house, it's tied up. You can't easily use it to invest in other things that can make you money.
So a house can be a good place to live, but it's not always a good investment.
Exactly. It depends on your individual situation and how you manage your finances. So what are some examples of real assets? Things that truly put money in your pocket?
Okay, so we're talking about things like rental properties that bring in rent every month.
Yep.
Businesses that can run without you having to be there all the time.
That's a big one.
Stocks that pay dividends. Bonds that generate interest income.
Yes.
Maybe some other real estate that brings in money.
Keep going.
Things like IOUs, where someone's paying you back with interest, royalties from something you created, like a book or a song.
That's the dream.
And even in today's world, things like websites that make money, successful YouTube channels.
Right. Anything that generates income on autopilot or goes up in value over time.
I'm getting the idea.
Yeah.
And essentially what we're talking about is building up your asset column on your balance sheet.
Exactly. Your balance sheet is a snapshot of what you own your assets and what you owe your liabilities. And the wealthy, they focus on building up that asset side, while a lot of other people get stuck on the liability side.
Yeah, they're too busy paying off debt instead of building wealth.
Exactly. The book illustrates this by showing the typical cash flow patterns of different income groups. For poor people, it's often a straight line. They get their paycheck, and it immediately goes out to pay for expenses.
Living paycheck to paycheck.
Yep. Middle class folks, they might have a higher income, but a lot of it goes towards liabilities like a big mortgage, car payments, credit card debt.
So they might look good on paper, but they're not actually building wealth.
Exactly. And then you have the rich. They focus on building up their assets so their money is constantly working for them, generating more income.
And that income then allows them to buy even more assets, creating a positive feedback loop.
Exactly. And the book makes this really interesting point. It says that most people are actually working for three different entities: their company, the bank, and the government.
Now, how's that?
Well, first, you're working for your company, helping them make money. Then, if you have debt, you're working for the bank through all those interest payments.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And then there's the government. We all have to pay taxes, right?
Tell me about it.
And the book highlights just how much of our income goes to taxes. It says that for the average person, all the money they earn from January 1st to about March 16th goes straight to the government.
Really? 2.5 months out of the year.
That's right. And if you think about it, over your whole career, let's say 40 years, that's like working for almost 6 years just to pay taxes.
Wow, that's crazy.
It is. So the point is, you got to be smart about your money. You got to understand assets and liabilities, focus on building up those assets, and minimize your expenses and debt.
It's like planting a tree. Once it's established, it keeps bearing fruit without you having to replant it every year.
I love that analogy. So we've talked about how important it is to understand assets and liabilities and to focus on building wealth that can last for generations.
It's not just about getting by, it's about setting yourself and your family up for long-term success.
Exactly. And that brings us to the third big lesson from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Mind your own business.
Okay, so what does that mean in this context?
It's about understanding that your job is not your business. Your job is just how you make money. Your business is about building up your assets.
So it's about creating something that works for you, not just working for someone else.
Exactly. And the book emphasizes that the wealthy focus on building up their asset column while everyone else is worried about their income statement.
Yeah, they're too busy trying to make ends meet instead of creating something that will make money for them in the long run.
And Kiyosaki shares his own story about how he applied this principle. He was working as a Xerox salesman, which wasn't a super high-paying job, but he used the money he earned to invest in apartments.
So even with a regular job, he was building his asset column.
And guess what? Within just 3 years, the income he was making from his real estate investments was more than his salary from Xerox.
Wow. So he was making more money passively than he was from his actual job.
That's right. And that gave him the freedom to quit his job and focus on building his own business, meaning his portfolio of income-generating assets.
So he broke free from the rat race by building up his assets.
Exactly. And the book encourages us to think about the different types of assets we can acquire, businesses that can run without us, stocks, bonds, income-generating real estate, royalties, and even things like websites and YouTube channels that can make money.
It's about diversifying your income streams and creating multiple sources of wealth.
Right. And the book has this really cool way of thinking about your assets. It says to think of each dollar you invest as a little employee working for you.
A dollar employee. I like that.
Each dollar is out there 24/7, working hard to make you more money. It's a workforce that never sleeps, never takes a vacation, and never asks for a raise.
So instead of trading your time for money, you're letting your money work for you.
Exactly. And the most important takeaway from this lesson is don't confuse your profession with your business. Your profession is what you do for a living. Your business is about building up your assets, creating something that generates income even when you're not working.
It's about taking control of your financial future, not letting your job define you.
So let's recap what we've learned from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. First, wealth is about time, not just money. How long could you survive without a paycheck? That's the real measure of your financial security.
Right. It's about having that safety net, that financial freedom to do what you want when you want.
Second, the difference between assets and liabilities. You got to know what puts money in your pocket and what takes it out. And you got to focus on building up those assets, not accumulating liabilities.
It's like building a strong financial foundation. You can't build a skyscraper on sand.
And finally, mind your own business. Build up your asset column, create something that generates income without you having to trade your time for it. Don't just work for someone else, build something for yourself.
And that brings up a question for all our listeners out there. If your money started working for you today, like a whole team of little dollar employees, what kind of future could you create? What would financial freedom look like for you?
That's the challenge we leave you with today. Start thinking about how you can acquire assets, even small ones. Shift your focus from earning a salary to generating passive income. It's a change in mindset, but it can make all the difference in your financial future.
It's never too early or too late to start building your own financial freedom.
That's right. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We hope it's given you some valuable insights and inspired you to take control of your financial destiny.
Now go out there and make those dollars work for you.
Until next time.